Some people laughed at your silence, not knowing it was the sound of the universe loading consequences. My dear chosen ones, there's something brutal and poetic about watching truth do its rounds. About watching the same ones who mocked your warnings now sprinting through storms they lit with their own matches. And yes, it's happening. Just like you felt it would, just like you knew it would. Their laughter, it's gone. Their ego, unraveling, and the silence they used to mistake for your weakness. It's now screaming in their ears like a siren they can't shut off. They ignored every signal, every shift in the wind, every uncomfortable truth you delivered with clarity. And now, Karma isn't sending emails. She's showing up in full armor, boots on, no sympathy, and a memory longer than their list of excuses. You see, the problem wasn't that they didn't understand. It's that they did, and they dismissed it. You didn't whisper. You didn't tiptoe. You gave them truth, raw, unfiltered, out of care, out of love, out of deep inner knowing, and they rolled their eyes like you were just being dramatic, too deep, too intense, too much. But guess what, chosen ones? Too much becomes the prophecy when the world pretends not to hear, and now they're choking on what they once called exaggeration. Here's a reality check. The universe never forgets the energy you send out, never. It simply waits for the perfect moment to return it, wrapped in the same intent it was given. That's not revenge. That's equilibrium. They thought karma was just a bedtime myth. But now they're waking up to the sharp edges of everything they buried, denied, or projected onto you. And you, my chosen ones, don't you dare shrink right now. Don't soften the glow. Don't second-guess your intuition, because you were right. Every red flag you spotted, every shadow you exposed, every intuitive hit you spoke aloud that got brushed off like lint, they're all receipts being processed, in full. Before we dive deeper, chosen ones, if this message is already striking a chord in your soul, pause for just a moment and show your support. Like this video if you've ever felt unseen, underestimated, or silenced. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep pouring truth, power, and perspective straight into your life. Your support fuels the fire. It helps us keep creating content that isn't just noise, but clarity, confirmation, and energy for those walking through the storm and rising above it. We're building something real here, and with you, it's only getting stronger. Some of them used your empathy as a leash, your kindness as currency, your presence as camouflage for their dysfunction. You became the shield they stood behind while throwing stones. And now that you've walked away, they're catching the ricochet bare-chested. That's what happens when they confuse your protection for weakness, when they think your silence is emptiness, not power under control. They were warned, gently, then firmly, then through chaos, and still they thought they could outrun the balance sheet. That just because you didn't clap back, nothing was coming. But oh, chosen ones, karma doesn't speak in threats. It speaks in patterns. It moves in silence. It collects. And when it delivers, it does so with surgical precision. There's a reason they're pacing at night. A reason their peace feels counterfeit. A reason the people around them suddenly feel unfamiliar. It's not paranoia. It's the aftermath, the haunted echo of every action they thought would never return. And now the walls they built to trap you in isolation are caving in around them. Poetic, isn't it? And maybe right now you're asking, why is this happening now? Why not earlier? Why did the universe wait this long? The answer is simple. Because karma isn't impulsive. It's strategic. It gives people time to change, to own up, to choose better. But when pride outruns growth, correction becomes the only teacher left. They had time, they had signs, they had you, and they still chose arrogance. Now they're learning that some warnings aren't loud until they echo back through loss. So let this moment energize you, chosen ones. This isn't just about them getting what they deserve. This is about you seeing clearly, finally. You weren't being too much. You were being precise. You weren't overreacting. You were tuned in, and the weight you carried from their denial, drop it. That was never yours to begin with. Because when you're chosen, your life becomes a mirror to others, a test they didn't know they were taking. And when they fail, it's not your responsibility to grade their paper, just to keep walking, keep glowing, keep building. Let them deal with the mess they wrote in permanent ink. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth anymore. That phase is over. You are not here to rescue people who played victim while holding the knife. That chapter is closed. You are not here to explain your silence to those who only respond to chaos. That story is done. You are here now to rise without apology, to move with clarity, to let your existence become the proof that alignment was never weakness. It was armor. They thought you'd break, but you bent and became unbreakable. They thought ignoring your truth would erase it. But truth doesn't vanish. It transforms into consequences. And those consequences, they're here, and they're loud. So to the ones who smirked while you wept, who smiled while you warned, who twisted your heart like it was disposable, welcome to the harvest. The energy is returning, the scoreboard is changing, and the silence they once laughed at, it's roaring now. And if you're still watching right now, that tells me everything I need to know. You're not average, you're chosen. While the world is busy gossiping, crashing, and choking on karma, you're here absorbing power, clarity, and confirmation. So do what chosen ones do. Smash that like button, subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments if you felt that eerie silence before the storm. And knew deep down the fallout wasn't yours, but theirs. If this message is hitting home, show your support with a super thanks and help us keep delivering real talk that breaks illusions and fuels elevation. And now, let's dive into this step by step. Because believe me, if you're truly chosen, what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's your reflection. These aren't coincidences, they're confirmations, and trust me, only the chosen recognize these signs. The rest, they're too busy crashing. Let's get started. Number 1, they mistook your silence for surrender. Now they're drowning in the echo. They took your stillness for surrender. Now they're learning the calm was the warning before the collapse. You thought I was ignoring you. I was just watching the clock run out on your arrogance. My dear chosen ones, let's make one thing crystal clear from the start. You weren't silent because you had nothing to say. You were silent because they weren't worth the sound. And now that the dust is rising and their world is starting to feel the heat, they're realizing they mistook your self-control for surrender. Big mistake. They called it weakness, passivity, even cowardice. When you didn't react to the disrespect, when you didn't clap back after the lies, the betrayal, the mockery, they told themselves you were done, finished, powerless. What they never understood is that silence is not submission, it's calculation, it's precision, and more often than not, it's a signal that something much bigger is unfolding. You didn't let them slide because you didn't care. You let them slide because you were operating on a higher frequency, a level they couldn't reach, let alone comprehend. You weren't waiting because you were afraid. You were waiting because you understood something they didn't. Timing hits harder than tantrums. See, chosen ones don't throw hands. They throw energy, and energy doesn't miss. They're only now beginning to feel what they once mocked. Their peace is cracked. Their plans keep falling apart. They keep checking over their shoulders, unsure why life feels like a trap door under their feet. That's not coincidence. That's the echo of everything they thought they got away with, coming back in surround sound. They fed off drama, needed a reaction to feel in control, and when you gave them none, they assumed they won. But silence from a chosen one is the biggest red flag the universe ever raised. Because you weren't stepping back in defeat, you were stepping out of the blast zone. You knew better than to wrestle pigs in the mud. That's not restraint, that's wisdom. Let them keep guessing. Let them replay the last time they crossed you, thinking you'd come crawling, begging, snapping back. What they didn't expect is that you wouldn't come back at all, and now their entire strategy is collapsing because you removed the one thing they could never manipulate, your attention. And let's talk about that for a second. Chosen ones. Because some of you are asking, was I too calm? Did I let them win? You disarmed them. You let them build their empire of lies with their own hands, brick by brick. You watched. You observed. You chose stillness not because you were frozen, but because you understood that energy always circles back. You just chose not to meet chaos with chaos. And that in itself is a flex they'll never comprehend. You weren't backed into a corner. You were backed by something bigger than ego. Your power doesn't come from volume. It comes from alignment. And now, the consequences they thought they outran are catching up. And you're still rising, untouched, unbothered, and undeniable. Because here's the truth, patience has an expiration date. You had grace, but even grace has its limits. And when that limit hits, the universe doesn't throw shade, it throws storms. And the difference between you and them is simple. You prepared in silence while they performed in delusion. You didn't react, but now life is reacting for you. The same ones who once bragged about getting away with it are the ones whose voices are cracking under pressure. And they don't even realize it's not bad luck. It's balance. You didn't need to seek justice. It was always circling back like a GPS signal with no off switch. And let's be honest, some of them only feel bad now because the consequences are showing up. Not because they've changed, not because they've grown, but because their masks are falling off and there's no one left to fool. They thought silence was safety, but silence was your strategy. And now their assumptions are crumbling under the weight of reality. They thought they broke you, but all they did was free you, and in your freedom, their karma found a clear shot. That's what they never calculated. That's what they never saw coming. So to my chosen ones, never doubt the power of your quiet. It's louder than any scream. It speaks in outcomes, not arguments. You didn't fall back. You stood firm in invisible armor. And now the very storm they tried to drown you in is pulling them under, while you float above, light as truth, clear as consequence. They thought you had no backup. What they didn't realize is that your backup was time, and time never forgets. Let them feel it. Let them deal with it. Let the weight of their own energy return to sender with interest. Because when you're truly chosen, you don't fire back. You let the silence work over time. And right now, it's collecting. Number 2, they laughed at the warning, but the law of return doesn't miss. They tried to kill the warning by silencing the voice, but now the echo's breaking down their door. You didn't fear the message, they did. That's why they aimed at you instead of facing themselves. My dear chosen ones, this one cuts deep because you know exactly what it feels like to be attacked, not for what you did, but for what you revealed. You didn't come in with ego. You didn't stand on some self-righteous pedestal. You weren't looking for a fight. All you did was speak truth. Uncomfortable, unfiltered, undeniable truth. And they couldn't handle it. So what did they do? They mocked the messenger. That's what people do when the truth is too loud and their conscience too fragile. They attack the reflection instead of facing the image. They throw stones at the one holding the mirror, not because the mirror is wrong, but because what's in it exposes everything they've been pretending not to see. You weren't trying to control them. You weren't trying to hurt them. You were trying to warn them. You saw the cycles. You saw the self-destruction. You saw the weight of their choices building up like a storm behind fake smiles. And when you called it out with clarity, with calm, with love even, they flipped the script. Suddenly, you were the problem. You were too deep, too intense, too dramatic. They didn't hear your message because your truth held them accountable. And accountability is like sunlight to people hiding behind shadows. They flinch, they recoil, they lash out. You didn't scare them. Their own reflection did. So they laughed, shrugged, whispered, gaslit. They made your wisdom sound like madness, your vision sound like delusion. They needed to twist it because accepting it meant admitting they weren't ready to grow. And the truth is, they were never mocking you. They were avoiding themselves. But here's the thing, chosen ones. You were never just speaking for yourself. You were the vessel, the amplifier, the warning siren they thought they could unplug. You weren't speaking to their ego. You were speaking to their buried truth. And truth doesn't die when it's ignored. It waits. And when it comes back, it doesn't knock gently. That same message they dismissed is now being delivered by life itself. Through breakdowns, through betrayals, through everything collapsing around them. The patterns you pointed out, they're stuck in them now, like a maze with no exit. And every time they try to blame someone new, the mirror you once held up is waiting for them in every room they walk into. This is what happens when people confuse deflection with freedom. They think if they shut you up, the consequences will go quiet too. But karma doesn't need your voice to echo a truth. It uses experience, pain, loss, repetition. And right now, they're realizing that rejecting the messenger never erased the message. It only delayed the lesson. And delay, that just makes it louder. And now they feel it. The burn of every ignored warning, the weight of every dismissed insight, the chaos that follows when truth is treated like noise. They're learning the hard way that life doesn't cancel consequences because you chose to laugh at the signs. Every word you spoke had gravity. It wasn't ego, it was clarity. It wasn't drama, it was foresight. And they missed that because they were too busy trying to look unbothered. But guess what? They're bothered now. Because the silence is loud, the lessons are personal, and the message? Unavoidable. That reflection they shattered has come back like shards underfoot. No filter, no audience, no excuses. Just the raw consequences of pretending accountability is optional. And you? You're not bitter. You're not vengeful. You're just watching it unfold from the calm you built when they thought you were crumbling. You were the test, the mirror, the bridge. And they chose to light it up instead of crossing it. They thought cutting you off would stop the transformation. But what they didn't realize is that your role wasn't to carry them. It was to reveal them. So, chosen ones, don't regret a thing. Don't second-guess your warning. Don't wish you had softened the truth or sugar-coated the signal. They weren't ready, and that's not on you. You came through with clarity when they were lost in confusion. You gave insight when they were stuck in impulse. And now your words are playing in their head like background music in a life that feels more and more unfamiliar by the day. This is the part where the truth doesn't just sting, it rewrites everything. Because when a message comes from alignment, from love, from deep awareness, and it's ignored, the consequences don't disappear. They compound. And what they once laughed at is now teaching them one brutal, undeniable truth. You weren't their enemy, you were their warning, and they failed the test. Now karma's speaking the message back to them, loud, clear, and without apology. Number 3, energy doesn't forget. The fallout. They never thought would come. They called it a myth. Now they're drowning in their own reflection. You thought karma was fiction until the plot twist became your reality. My dear chosen ones, here's the part they never took seriously. Karma. Not the mystical lightning strike on a bad day version, not the fairy tale with instant justice. Number, the real karma. The one that walks in quietly, takes notes, and waits for the right time to flip the script on the ones who thought they were writing yours. See, karma isn't about revenge. It doesn't need rage. It doesn't work on your timeline. And it doesn't show up just to make a scene. Karma is energy, simple, silent, surgical. It's the equal and opposite reaction to the chaos they thought had no consequence. It's the truth circling back like a shadow they can't outrun. They treated life like it was a game with no rules. Thought as long as no one caught them red-handed, they were free and clear. So they lied, manipulated, used people like props in their personal drama, and laughed like the world was their stage. They stepped on the backs of those who loved them just to feel tall, and all the while they told themselves, "Nothing's happening, I must be good." But what they didn't know is this: karma doesn't check your social media. Karma doesn't care how you spin the story. Karma waits in silence while they brag, while they strut, while they pretend the damage they caused never happened. It waits until the mask slips, the ego fades, and their own energy turns into a mirror they can't escape. That mirror is showing up now. They're sitting in the middle of chaos they created but can't trace back. Why is everything falling apart, they ask. Relationships collapsing, plans disintegrating, peace slipping through their fingers like water, and they pretend to be confused, but they're not. They know. They remember every lie they sold like truth. Every time they smiled while plotting, every moment they twisted someone's heart just because they could. They know. And now, karma's not knocking politely. It's inside the house, rearranging everything. This is the moment when people call it bad luck, when they claim the universe is being unfair. But what they're experiencing isn't punishment, it's feedback. It's life speaking in a language louder than excuses and clearer than denial. It's the emotional invoice for every ounce of destruction they sent out dressed as charm. And for you, chosen ones, this is your clarity. Because I know at some point you wondered, why didn't I fight back? Why didn't I expose them? Did they actually win? Number. You were never meant to fight fire with fire. You were meant to stay lit in your truth while they burned themselves out. What you did was choose alignment over reaction. You stepped back, and now life is stepping in. They thought they got away with it because karma didn't slap them instantly, but karma doesn't operate on impulse. It's not in a rush to serve justice, it's precise. And that's what makes it powerful. It builds pressure behind the scenes. And when it hits, it doesn't just shake the surface, it breaks the foundation. That's why they're crumbling now. Not because someone exposed them, not because you cursed them, but because their own energy is circling back with a mirror in hand. And the reflection is ugly, loud, and unavoidable. They laughed at the idea of consequences. They called karma just a spiritual scare tactic. A bedtime story for naive people who believe in energy. But now, the same people who mocked the concept can't sleep at night, can't breathe in the silence, can't function without things going sideways, and every time they try to rebuild, the cracks just get deeper. Because karma isn't random, it's intentional, it doesn't destroy, it reveals. And what it's revealing is exactly who they've always been underneath the performance. That's not cruelty, that's justice. So, chosen ones, don't ever confuse your silence for weakness again. Don't ever second-guess the choice to walk away, to rise above, to let go instead of lashing out. Because what you did was give karma a clean shot. You didn't interfere. You didn't pollute the energy. You just stepped back and let the return route open. And look at what's happening now. They're getting hit from directions they never expected. Because karma doesn't come back the same way it was sent. It adapts, it aligns, it waits until the lesson lands so hard it can't be ignored. So let them feel it. Let the mirror show them exactly what they projected into the world. Because the return isn't just about what they did. It's about who they were when they did it. And that truth, that's what's eating them alive. And you? Keep your hands clean. Keep your energy high. Keep walking like you're protected, because you are. Not by superstition, not by rage, but by truth. And truth always cashes out. They didn't believe in karma. Now they're living in it. And this is just the beginning. Number 4, the pain they planted. Came back with interest. They tried to break your spirit. Now they're choking on the chaos they created. They studied your scars, not to heal them, but to weaponize them. And now those same blades are cutting their piece to pieces. My dear chosen ones, This one isn't about surface wounds. This is about soul-level warfare. They weren't just trying to hurt your feelings. They were trying to rattle your foundation, shake your sanity, collapse your clarity. See, when someone targets your heart, your joy, your stability, they're not attacking a weakness. They're going after your power source. And that's exactly what they tried to do. But what they didn't expect was the return. Let's call it what it is. These weren't random jabs. These were intentional strikes. Whispered lies, calculated betrayals, gaslighting served with a smile. They weren't lashing out because they misunderstood you. No, they understood exactly who you were. That's why they came so hard. That's why they smiled in your face while plotting behind your back. That's why they played the long game, because your energy exposed everything they were trying to hide within themselves. You didn't trigger them because you were loud. You triggered them because you were centered, peaceful, grounded, and they hated that because you had what they couldn't fake. And instead of learning from your light, they tried to kill it. They didn't just want you hurt. They wanted you shaken, silenced, doubting your own worth. They wanted you to self-destruct so they could sit back and call it your fault. They thought your inner peace was something they could dismantle with gossip, manipulation, and subtle attacks. They thought if they could just make you question your path, your identity, your voice, then maybe you'd finally shrink to fit inside their comfort zone. They poked at your insecurities, brought up your past, made you feel too much or never enough, all while acting like it was harmless, like they weren't doing anything wrong. They wore masks and kept their hands clean, but make no mistake, chosen one, it was spiritual warfare. But here's the part they never saw coming. The energy didn't just bounce back, it boomeranged, and now it's hitting them in ways they can't dodge. The same confusion they tried to plant in your mind, they're waking up in it. The same isolation they tried to push you into. Now it surrounds them, the loyalty they sabotaged in your life. Now they can't find a single soul who would ride for them honestly. Why? Because energy doesn't follow appearances, it follows intention. And their intentions were rotten. This isn't bad luck, it's symmetry. And the collapse isn't loud or dramatic, it's internal, it's spiritual, it's personal, it's the slow unraveling of someone who is finally being introduced to their own reflection. Not the version they posted online, not the mask they wore in public, but the real, raw version of themselves that you saw through from day one. See, chosen ones don't need to retaliate. They don't need to post receipts or start wars, because karma doesn't run on drama. It runs on alignment. And right now, they're misaligned with everything they tried to fake. Let that sink in. While they were busy obsessing over how to make you break, you were quietly rebuilding. While they were laughing behind your back, you were laying bricks under your feet. While they were watching your page, you were watching your path. And now, you're elevated, and they're surrounded by versions of themselves they can't control or escape. Backstabbers, liars, opportunists. It's not a coincidence. It's the exact mirror of who they chose to be with you. The very traits they used to poison your peace are now living rent-free in their own circles. People are flipping on them. Trust is dead. Loyalty is performative. And the real kicker, they can't tell if it's real love or a setup anymore, because that's the paranoia that comes from playing the long game with dirty hands. But don't get it twisted, chosen ones. This isn't about revenge. This isn't getting even. This is alignment cleaning house. This is what happens when you push out chaos and assume the bill won't return. Every word, every smirk, every moment they tried to fracture your mind while smiling through their teeth, it's all showing up now. Not as punishment, but as reflection. And the most painful part for them, it's not public. It's private. It's in their mind, their body, their inner world. It's not the kind of downfall people can post about. It's the kind that makes you stare at the ceiling at 2 a.m., wondering when the spiral started, and knowing exactly who it started with. So, my dear chosen ones, take a breath, not out of pity but out of clarity. Because this is your confirmation. You never had to stoop to their level. You never had to prove your worth through a fight. Your silence wasn't weakness. Your peace wasn't delusion. It was your shield. And now, that same peace they tried to poison is the only thing separating you from them. They thought their hands were clean, but energy remembers fingerprints. And now they're holding the very chaos they tried to serve you on a silver platter, signed by their own hand. Number 5. They used your heart like a weapon. Now theirs is turning cold. They turned your heart into a weapon. Now theirs is imploding from the inside out. They thought breaking your heart would break your power, but all they did was sign the lease for their own emotional decay. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about one of the most underestimated sources of power on this planet. Your heart. Not the performative kind, not the romanticized version, but the real, raw, relentless heart that stays open in a world built to shut it down. That's your gift. That's your weapon. And that's exactly what they came for. They didn't attack your bank account. They didn't sabotage your image. They didn't even try to challenge your intellect. No, they went for the core. Your empathy, your loyalty, your endless capacity to see light in people who were already drowning in darkness. Because they knew that if they could twist your heart, they could twist your world. They saw how you loved, how deeply, how purely, how powerfully, and they mistook it for softness, a target, a loophole, something they could exploit with just the right mix of charm and manipulation. And that's exactly what they did. Not because they didn't understand your heart, but because they understood it too well. You weren't hard to figure out, you were just rare. And to those who live in emotional scarcity, rarity becomes a threat. They didn't stumble into hurting you by accident, they made it a process. They studied your patterns, how you forgive, how you always give the benefit of the doubt, how your boundaries stretch for people you care about. They took notes. And then they flipped your love into a strategy. They didn't want your support. They wanted your surrender. They didn't want your light. They wanted to drain it and call the shadow peace. Every time you gave them grace, they saw green lights. Every time you gave them space, they filled it with manipulation. Every time you gave them another chance, they sharpened their tactics. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you were strong enough to believe that people can change. That love can heal, that honesty can fix. And in doing so, you gave them access to something sacred. But instead of respecting that access, they weaponized it. And now they're locked out. Now that energy supply has been cut off. Now that emotional feeding ground is gone. The warmth they once got for free is no longer available. And guess what? They're starving, not just for affection, but for realness. Because the deeper truth is, your love wasn't just a comfort, it was a mirror. And without it, they're forced to face who they really are. No mask, no performance, just the hollow sound of every fake bond they've formed in your absence. They're still surrounded by people, sure. The room's still full, but there's no loyalty, no truth. Just forced smiles, shallow conversations, and conditional support. Everything they tried to create without you now feels like an empty echo chamber. They burned the bridge thinking they'd build a mansion on the ashes, but now they're sleeping in ruins they can't emotionally rebuild. Because here's the law they forgot. When you use love as a weapon, you curse your own ability to receive it. It's like trying to poison someone's well, only to realize you were drinking from it too. You can't sabotage something pure and expect purity to return. It doesn't work like that. The heart they tried to corrupt has now become their karma. Now they can't trust anyone. Now they second-guess every compliment. Now every relationship feels like a deal, a gamble, a performance. And maybe they're asking themselves, why does nothing feel genuine anymore? Because you were the last genuine thing in their life. You were their mirror, their anchor, their shot at experiencing something real without masks, without pretense. And they took it for granted, laughed at it, twisted it, weaponized it. And in doing so, they didn't just lose you, they lost access to what makes life feel real. And here's what makes this part hard to watch. Chosen ones, they know. They might never say it. They might act unbothered. But underneath the surface of their forced confidence and loud distractions, they feel the void, the silence, the absence. Not just of you, but of what you brought. Clarity, peace, emotional safety. And that kind of loss can't be replaced by attention or status. That kind of loss lingers, it rots. Their heart is crumbling, not because you cursed them, but because they did it to themselves. They played games with something that was never meant to be played with. And now the emptiness they projected onto you is living rent-free inside them. That's what happens when you turn sincerity into a sport. You lose the ability to win anything real ever again. So don't regret how you loved. Don't regret how open you were. You weren't naive. You were the test. You were the rare chance to rise above fear and manipulation, and they failed it. With arrogance, with pride, with calculation. Let that be their burden to carry, because you, chosen one, are no longer available for misuse. You no longer offer your heart to people who see love as leverage. You no longer feed the emotionally bankrupt at your own expense. You've evolved, you've closed the door, and now, without your presence, they're left with a haunting truth. You were never the one who was too much. They were the ones who weren't enough. Let them feel it. Let them rot in what they claimed to crave. Because when a chosen heart walks away, no imitation will ever replace what they lost. Number 6. Your quiet was power, their loud was panic in disguise. They mistook your silence for surrender. Now their screams have no audience. They laughed because you were silent. Now they're silent because you were right. My dear chosen ones, there was a time when their laughter echoed like victory bells, wasn't there? You remember it clearly. Every time you chose not to react, they laughed louder. Every time you took the high road, they called you weak. Every time you kept your composure, they told stories behind your back. To them, your silence was proof you had no fight left. But what they didn't understand is that you weren't out of strength. You were in control of it. They were loud on purpose, not because they were confident, but because deep down, they knew your silence wasn't emptiness. It was power, controlled, refined, chosen. You see, people who feel truly secure don't need to perform. But they put on a show. They needed an audience. They needed to be seen mocking you, grinning wide while your name was on their tongue, smirking like they'd won something. And now, that stage is empty. That spotlight moved, and all that's left is the one person they can't escape, themselves. And it's eating them alive, because now, in the absence of your energy, your grace, your restraint, the very silence they used to celebrate is surrounding them. And it's loud. Louder than their jokes, louder than their fake smiles, louder than the crowd they used to hide behind. Because silence has a way of stretching the truth out until it's undeniable. When the noise dies, the masks fall, and when the audience leaves, so does the distraction. You didn't disappear, you just chose not to dance in the circus, and they didn't realize the moment you stopped responding was the moment their downfall began. Because chosen ones don't strike back, they step back, and in that step, karma steps in. Quiet, clean, precise. Now they sit in rooms that used to be filled with gossip, but those rooms are empty now. Those who once clapped when they mocked you, gone. The people they surrounded themselves with, ghosts of their own energy, because nothing repels loyalty like fake power. And nothing invites karma like mocking a storm you don't understand. The silence they once laughed at, it's haunting now. And maybe some of you, chosen ones, are wondering, why does it matter? Why even care that they're feeling the weight now? Because it's proof. Proof that you were never the weak one. Proof that your stillness wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Proof that real power doesn't announce itself. It allows the consequences to speak. And those consequences? They're speaking now. Not through public humiliation, not through scandal, but through the kind of quiet unraveling that happens when the show is over and the mask is off. The insomnia, the regret, the racing thoughts, the fake friendships built on shared bitterness, now crumbling under the weight of emptiness. This isn't a fall, it's a reckoning, and it's happening behind closed doors, exactly where it hurts the most. You see, karma isn't flashy. It doesn't post updates. It doesn't need to be seen to be real. It works best in the quiet, the very quiet they use to weaponize against you. And now, in that same quiet, their truth is echoing back at them like a scream they can't mute. They shattered the mirror when they saw themselves in you. But mirrors don't break the truth, they just scatter it. And truth, no matter how long it hides, always finds its way home. Now they're seeing it in flashes, in the way their peace feels foreign, in the way their smiles don't reach their eyes, in the way the people around them reflect everything they tried to project onto you. And you didn't have to raise your voice, you didn't have to defend your name, you just had to survive the lie long enough for the truth to make its entrance, and now it has. Chosen ones understand this. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was preservation, it was protection, it was you choosing peace over pettiness, elevation over retaliation, and look how that choice is aging. Look at the shift, look at the unraveling, look at how the very silence they called your downfall is now their mirror, their echo, their reckoning. They scream behind closed doors, not because someone is hurting them, but because they can't unsee what they did to you. The guilt they joked about, the regret they ignored, the energy they sent out. It's back. Not in rage, but in reflection. And reflection is ruthless when you've spent your life avoiding it. So let them scream, let them crumble in silence, let them taste the truth they spit on. Because you stayed silent, not because you were scared, but because you were being preserved for something greater. And now, while they sit in chaos trying to mute the echoes of your silence, you walk forward, lighter, clearer, free. And if anyone still doubts the power of staying silent in the face of chaos, let this be your confirmation. The loudest laughs often come from the most broken places. And now, the only thing echoing louder than their mockery is karma. Number 7. They called it freedom, but it was just self-destruction in costume. They took the wheel with no map. Now they're lost in the freedom they weaponized. They weren't running toward freedom. They were running from accountability, and now the road they chose has no exit. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about the people who claimed they were just living their truth, when in reality they were sprinting headfirst into chaos with their eyes wide shut. They called it freedom. They called it self-expression. But what they really wanted was a free pass to self-destruct without being questioned. You saw the red flags, not just one or two, a full parade of them waving in broad daylight. But when you pointed it out, you were too intense, too serious, too negative. You weren't controlling, you were concerned. You weren't limiting their life, you were trying to save it. But they didn't want to hear that. To them, any form of structure felt like chains. Any call for self-reflection sounded like judgment. The moment you asked them to look in the mirror, they accused you of being the problem. Because chosen ones, people drowning in denial, always see clarity as an attack. You weren't the villain. You were the lifeline. But when people are high off their own delusions, they'll cut the very rope that could have pulled them out, just to prove a point. They took your guidance as criticism. They took your care as control. They wanted cheerleaders, not challengers. They wanted applause for their chaos, not accountability. And when you didn't play along, when you refused to co-sign the dysfunction, you became the buzzkill, the enemy, the one who didn't get it. But let me tell you something, chosen ones, you got it. You saw the collapse long before it came. You heard the storm in the silence. You weren't judging them, you were reading the forecast. And now that the skies have opened and the wreckage is real, they're sitting in the ruins of what they once called freedom. Let's be real, they didn't ignore the red flags because they were blind. They ignored them because they didn't want to stop. They saw the warnings, they heard your voice, they even felt the pull in their gut. But temporary pleasure was louder, ego was stronger, and so they ran straight into the fire, grinning, posting, bragging, while calling it liberation. But chosen ones, we know the truth. Freedom without direction is just chaos with better PR. And now that the noise is fading, the thrill has turned into a trap. There's no peace in their mind, no loyalty in their circle, no clarity in their path. What once felt like breaking free now feels like being lost without a compass, or worse, without a destination. They're exhausted, not from being controlled, but from controlling nothing. The same structure they laughed at, the same boundaries they mocked. They crave it now. They're aching for the order they once rejected. But you're not there anymore, and the bridges they burned can't be rebuilt with regret. That's the thing about chosen ones. Our presence doesn't just shine, it stabilizes. And once you take that away from people who've mistaken recklessness for identity, they feel the collapse fast. Now they're surrounded by yes-men who won't challenge them, only enable them. Their echo chamber is full, but their soul is empty. Their freedom came at the cost of direction. Their rebellion, a disguise for avoidance. And their confidence, it was just chaos dressed in confidence's clothes. But you warned them. You told them when the spark started. You tried to explain that some fires don't light the way. They burn everything down, but they were too busy dancing in the flames, too proud to stop, too loud to listen. And now the flames have gone cold. The silence they once celebrated is deafening, and the path they called their truth is covered in the debris of poor choices and missed opportunities. So if you're watching this, chosen one, and asking, did I abandon them? Number you did what you were supposed to do. You stepped back so karma could step in. They didn't want to be guided. They wanted to be validated. And when you stopped clapping, they thought you disappeared. But you didn't disappear. You ascended. You chose peace over chaos, direction over distraction, growth over noise. And now they're sitting in the very aftermath you tried to prevent. Their freedom was never freedom. It was just self-sabotage on a delay. And guess what? The alarm just went off. Let this be your reminder. Never apologize for seeing the warning signs. Never shrink your clarity to make others feel comfortable in confusion. You're not here to co-sign collapse. You're here to be the lighthouse. And if they choose to ignore the light, that's not your guilt to carry. That's their lesson to learn. Because not everyone who screams freedom is flying. Some are just falling with no parachute, no plan, and no way back. And chosen ones, you were never meant to follow them down. Number 8. They played with fire and called it power. Now they're burning from within. They wanted the power without the path, the image without the integrity. Now they're stuck in a game they were never built to finish. My dear chosen ones, you saw it, you felt it, you warned them. But they rolled their eyes, scoffed, brushed you off like you were doing the most. In their eyes you were too deep, too serious, too intense. But what they failed to realize is that while they were playing pretend with things they didn't understand, you were moving through real battles, carrying scars they couldn't begin to comprehend. They treated energy like a trend, like a new aesthetic to post about, a backdrop to their ego. They didn't light candles with intention, they lit them for attention. They weren't trying to elevate, they were trying to manipulate. They learned buzzwords but skipped over meaning. They posted crystals without understanding vibration. They threw around terms like energy, evil eye, and manifestation like hashtags, thinking that spiritual power is something you can fake for a few likes or twist for personal gain. But now they're standing in the middle of a fire they set themselves with no idea how to put it out. They thought spiritual warfare was a vibe. They thought you could wear protection like a fashion choice, mimic rituals without reverence, speak intentions without integrity, and walk away untouched. But here's the thing, chosen ones already know. Energy doesn't play games. It doesn't care if you were just experimenting. It doesn't care if you had good intentions. It only cares if you were aligned. And they weren't. They dabbled in things you warned them about, pulled cards, lit incense, recited chants, played with forces like they were toys, not tools. Some even tried to use energy to control others, all while laughing behind closed doors like they'd unlocked some secret shortcut to power. But there are no shortcuts when it comes to real energy. There is only understanding or consequences. And now, they're drowning in the very waves they summoned. Their sleep, unrested. Their mind, scattered. Their spirit, paranoid, jittery, confused. And it's not just bad luck. It's not random. It's the return. Everything they touched with impure motives is now touching them back with precision. And what's wild is this. The damage isn't even coming from some external enemy. It's not you. It's not envy. It's not a hater. It's the same energy they tried to weaponize now clawing back through their own life. They casted shadows they couldn't handle. They cracked doors they were never meant to open. They invited in chaos while laughing, thinking control came with the costume. But spiritual power is not cosplay. It's not a language. It's not some TikTok aesthetic. It's real, it's ancient, and it moves with purpose. You warned them, not from fear, but from experience. You knew how sacred energy really is because you've lived through it, fought through it, been wounded and reborn through it. But to them, your caution sounded like control. Your boundaries looked like judgment. Your discernment, too much, too serious. And now they're realizing, you weren't too much. You were right. Everything they once mocked is unraveling them piece by piece. The people they trusted are ghosting. The vibe they chased is nowhere to be found. Even the rituals they once bragged about feel hollow now because energy can smell authenticity, and they never had it. They wanted the image of being powerful without the discipline it takes to hold power. They borrowed language they never earned, and now they're paying in full. Not through scandal, not through drama, through quiet collapse, through personal exposure, through internal unraveling. And the most painful part? There's no one left to blame. No algorithm, no full moon ritual, no positive vibes only mantra can patch what they've unleashed. Because karma doesn't care how pretty your aesthetic is. It cares whether you were aligned when you touched the unseen. They're learning now that sacred isn't trendy. That energy isn't entertainment, and that when you use spiritual tools for clout or control, they don't just stop working, they turn on you. So to you, my chosen ones, this is confirmation. You weren't crazy, you weren't paranoid, you weren't being too spiritual, you were aware. You saw the red flags, the gimmicks, the flexing. And you chose restraint over retaliation, integrity over influence. And now that everything is falling apart for them, you don't need to say a word. Let the energy speak. Because the truth is, when people treat sacred things like a game, they don't just lose, they burn. And this time, the fire isn't coming from anyone else. It's coming from the inside. The very spark they struck for show has now become the blaze they can't outrun. They don't need enemies. They've become their own. And karma? Karma doesn't need to swing a sword. It just lights the match and watches the consequences glow. Number 9. The truth they refuse to speak is screaming through their chaos. They thought silence would protect them from the truth, but silence doesn't bury truth. It buries them. My dear chosen ones, let's get into it. There are people right now, maybe even close ones, walking around with mouths stitched shut by ego, but souls screaming in agony. The ones who caused the deepest cuts, who lied with a straight face, who played victim while you bled, are now waking up in a reality they can't outrun. They had every opportunity to make it right, to say, "I'm sorry," to speak truth, to acknowledge the damage they caused. But instead, they chose silence over sincerity, denial over decency, pride over peace. And now karma isn't just knocking, it's dragging the truth out of them the hard way. They thought if they ignored it long enough, it would vanish, that if they stayed quiet, the mess would clean itself. But energy doesn't work like that. Truth doesn't expire. It waits. And when it comes back, it doesn't ask for permission. It kicks the door open and starts rearranging everything. The peace they once faked, gone. The smile they performed with, cracked. The confidence they paraded in front of others, shattered. They're exhausted, confused, and can't figure out why their world feels so heavy, why everything feels off, why sleep won't come, and their own reflection is starting to look like a stranger. But deep down, they know. Oh, they know exactly what this is. They know they betrayed someone who only offered love. They know they manipulated a heart that was loyal. They know they broke something sacred and never once looked back to repair it. Chosen ones, they weren't clueless. They were careless. And now that same carelessness is coming back to collect. Not in public shaming, not in viral collapse, but in quiet, gnawing internal suffering, the kind that doesn't let you breathe right, the kind that eats away at you from the inside, the kind that no lie can cover. This isn't karma trying to punish. This is karma forcing a confession they refuse to give willingly. This is the cost of evading accountability. Because here's what no one tells them. Life doesn't let truth stay buried. It rots under the surface and poisons everything from the roots up. They're losing relationships because they can't show up honestly. They're losing peace because guilt makes a bed but never lets you sleep. They're losing themselves because when you suppress the truth long enough, it starts eroding the very foundation you stand on. You, chosen one, don't be surprised if they still don't say a word to you. Don't expect them to show up with a clean apology or a clear mind. The apology you deserved was silenced by ego a long time ago. But make no mistake, they are paying, not through your hands, but through the unraveling of their own. You're probably wondering, why couldn't they just own it? Why was it so hard for them to say what needed to be said? Because the truth meant confronting everything they tried to hide, not just from you, but from themselves. And people who live in delusion fear clarity more than consequence, so they avoided, deflected, minimized, until there was nothing left to protect them from the truth circling back. Now they're left with the weight, not because you demanded it, but because life did. This isn't revenge. This isn't you winning. This is balance doing what it always does, catching what thought it slipped away. They thought silence was strength, but silence became the stage where karma started screaming. The energy they refused to acknowledge has now turned on them. And while they might still pretend on the outside, trust this, their insides are chaos. Their spirit is cracking. Their nervous system is on high alert. Every moment of stillness is a confrontation, and every time they avoid accountability, the pressure gets tighter, louder, heavier. Their body is tired, because guilt is a weight the soul was never designed to carry long term. Their mind is racing, because denial is mentally expensive. Their connections feel shallow, because real relationships don't grow where honesty is missing. This is what happens when people believe they can wrong someone chosen and walk away unscathed. Not because you wish them harm, but because life requires balance. It demands alignment. And when it doesn't get it willingly, it applies pressure until the truth is unavoidable. They didn't just hurt you. They hurt someone who was part of their evolution. And now, instead of expanding, they're shrinking in confusion and pain. The very words that could have freed them, the apology that could have unlocked healing, are now being replaced by life events that force them to feel every drop of what they refused to admit. And here's the twist. You might never hear the apology, but you'll see it. You'll see it in how they spiral, in how they avoid your name, in how they isolate. in how every smile fades quicker and every relationship ends faster. That's not bad luck. That's unspoken truth rotting its way to the surface. So, chosen one, breathe easy. Let the silence speak for you. Let karma continue the conversation. You didn't lose. You didn't fold. You stood in truth. And now that truth is doing exactly what it was always meant to do: be seen, be felt, and be dealt with. And now, chosen ones, as the dust settles and the truth continues to surface, remember this: silence never meant weakness. It meant wisdom. The apologies they withheld are now echoing through their chaos, while you rise lighter, clearer, and untouchable. What was once buried is now loud, and the ones who ignored the warnings are learning that karma never misses. It only waits. If this message hit your spirit, show your support. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop 77 in the comments if you feel this confirmation, and share this with someone who needs to hear what silence always knew.